This is the Cole Memo. I am your host, Cole Preston. In this episode, I'll be sitting down with Danielle Schumacher to talk about an Illinois cannabis tradition that some say dates all the way back to the 80s. It was called Hash Wednesday. Every episode of the Cole Memo is released in audio, video, and transcript format. To find the transcript, audio, or video version of any episode, please refer to the description of the episode that you're listening to. Within that description, you can find a link that will take you to our website, which will display the transcript for this episode and the platforms where you can find this episode in audio or video formats. If you're unable to locate the episode description on whichever platform you're listening from, simply note the episode number and visit thecolememo.com. From there, you can find the corresponding episode, and then you will be able to access the audio, video, and or transcript version of the podcast. You might also find any links that we reference during the episode so that you might be able to do your own research. If you're not listening to this episode of the Cole Memo on Patreon, then you're listening to this episode later than our patrons. To become a patron, go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. Once again, that's thecolememo.com/Patreon. It's a great way to support our show. One of the best ways to support our show is absolutely free. Subscribe to or follow our show. Leave us a positive review from wherever you're listening to us from. Favorite this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, or post a review. Your engagement and support is appreciated. Today is October 24th, 2023, and this conversation was captured on October 23rd, 2023, and will be part of a series that I plan to do on Hash Wednesday. So this is episode 1 of that series, if you will. They're not going to be released in any chronological order because, as you'll find, this participant was from like the 2000s, but I am in touch with people from some of the earlier protests in the 80s, for example. So stay tuned for all that and more. Enjoy this episode of The Cole Memo. Hello, Danielle. How's it going today?
Hey, Cole. So glad to be on your show and excited to talk about Hash Wednesday, some of the history
Yeah,
in Illinois. So yeah, I'm having a great day.
hell yeah. Well, before we get into all that, I wanted to give you the space. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to my audience? This is the first time you'll have been on my show.
Yeah. So I'm Danielle Schumacher. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs and have been involved in cannabis advocacy of some sort since the early 2000s. When I was a student at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, is when I got involved pretty much full time, and been doing it ever since. I've been going to cannabis conferences all that time, and I wanted to mention I just got back from Phoenix, Arizona, for the Drug Policy Alliance conference. Reform 2023 was really inspiring and amazing. So I feel really, really lucky to be part of all of this and to be talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you for your time. And, you know, I guess let's start with when did you come to, we'll call it UIUC. And when we say that, folks, I want to say that we're referring to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. So when did you come to UIUC?
I was a student there from 2000 to 2004.
Gotcha.
And a lot of my classmates from my high school went to Urbana-Champaign as well. It was kind of like the backup school for people who couldn't get into an Ivy League or couldn't afford it or something like that. It was like the backup school for some reason at that point. But it's actually a really, really good school for my major was anthropology. And I'm really glad I couldn't go to the University of Chicago, because if I had gone to a more difficult school, I don't think I would have had, well, I know I wouldn't have had the time for all the student activities and things we got involved in on campus, as students. And then I lived there until 2005, in Urbana until 2005, and was also involved in some community work there as well. So got off campus a little bit more than the average student, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. And you kind of answered the why did you come to UIUC, which is my second question. You said anthropology, is that right?
Yeah, my
Cool.
bachelor's is in anthropology.
Very cool. And the question that's going to lay out everything, when and how did you first hear about Hash Wednesday? And maybe as a part of that, you'll be able to explain what is Hash Wednesday. So,
um, I really don't know when I first heard about it. I think I probably knew that it happened. I believe it happened when I was a freshman. Maybe I was talking to a few people, when you had reached out, and then it just seems like something that was always there in
mm,
some form or another, since the 80s for sure,
yeah.
but possibly since the 70s. And was one of the I was looking back, and one of the flyers for Hash Wednesday that I saw said seventh annual, and that was in 2004-ish. But I think that yeah, that flyer was inaccurate, because I know for sure Hash Wednesday had happened um, decades ago, decades before I was a student there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll pull up maybe a newspaper clipping of the oldest one I can find at least. Well, we can start with this one and then we'll get back on track. But just for a moment, for history's sake, here's a newspaper clipping from April 19th, 1989, and it features actually an individual we will be interviewing in this series, Joshua Sloan. And he's actually pictured a lot in these newspaper clippings, which is really cool. He didn't even realize some of these photos still existed. So it was cool to hear him say, like, wow, that is me, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, to your point, and I've always heard that it's a little bit unclear. And actually, I think it was even in one of the newspaper clippings you sent me. It's always been a little bit unclear when exactly this started.
Mhm.
But yeah, like you say, I can find some things to point to as far as back as the 80s, at least,
For
of it
sure.
having started. But if you could, for our audience, so you had said maybe you don't exactly remember when you had heard about it, but if you could, for the audience, when you heard about it, what did you understand it to be? What was Hash Wednesday?
So when I heard about it, I was also learning about other public gatherings and cannabis festivals of different sorts around the Midwest. Um, they're all called something different. There's one in Madison, one in Detroit, um,
It was called like the Hash Bash in Detroit, right? Or something like that.
Hash Bash in Michigan. I know they might still do the one in Madison, actually, that had been there even longer than Hash Wednesday, I believe. Just around the Midwest, but definitely not Indiana, of course. I didn't know of any cannabis festivals in Indiana at that time. But yeah, it's a gathering, and it was specifically on campus. Hash Wednesday was on the campus, which is in Champaign, Illinois, central Illinois. Feels pretty rural, but it's a big college town. Um, yeah, people would gather there, and mostly the goal was just as many people as possible to smoke weed on the campus, and around the time of 420, but its own thing. And I mean, when I first heard about it, I remember getting a big kick out of the like religious implications, of the name Hash Wednesday. Um, so just a lot of festivities. I'm sure it varied a lot over time. I haven't kept up since I was involved in organizing it, but yeah, just sometimes more a smaller group, low key. There was definitely a phase of it being pretty small, but I always heard that it had gone on continuously, at least in small, at least a small gathering of people from the community. It's a tradition for them. And so it's a really unique event on campus there because it's truly students and community showing up and share that tradition. Although that's varied over the years, because when I was thinking back, some of the years I attended, I don't think there was a large presence of community members, but the cannabis community was merged anyway. That was one of the parts of campus life that was really intertwined with locals, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of funny to hear. I actually do know a local, and I was telling the individual, so he participated in many Hash Wednesdays, and I was telling, them that I was interviewing a range of people, and they were like, you mind naming off some names?" And I was like, "Well, Danielle Schumacher, if Joshua Salone, if you Danielle, oh, I've shared a few bowls with Danielle." So he's a local. He was not, I don't believe he was in college at the time. So just to your point of
Yeah.
community cannabis community members showing up, I believe maybe that person's an example of that. Just last question on that, just to dwell on it a little bit.
I know I keep going off topic or not
No,
answering
no,
the
you're not, you're killing
not.
it. Don't worry about it. I wanted to just frame it in a different way. Just because maybe it's me, looking through everything with rose-colored glasses, but I get this like youthful feeling in my stomach, like when I would have heard about Hash Wednesday, because it doesn't go on anymore nowadays, to what I understand, and if it does, it's really low key. But I put myself like when I was in college and like thinking about if I would have heard an event like this, and I just can feel this like feeling in my stomach. Was that what it was like for you, or like what? I don't know. I'm just trying to get a sense.
I mean, at the time it was pure freedom. We
Yeah.
felt completely untouchable. Like we could do anything, almost like not anything we want on campus, but as long as all we did was smoke a little bit of weed, and if we weren't too, it
Crazy. Yeah.
never was too big or got too out of control or anything like that. We never tried to mix it with alcohol or anything. It was a simple, civil disobedience, really, because that was not allowed on campus. So there was that rush for sure of like, wow, we can do this, and we can try to add more to it and get the word out about it. And we felt really confident. Like thinking back, it's like, wow, who did we think we were? But we were students, so we could get away with it. I was very aware. I was in student government, and I was very aware. I felt a sense of like aware that we had the privilege as students. We were protected as far as doing that kind of event. That um, we were in a good position to, just get this simple things like file the form with the campus to have permission to use the space. So
Right.
we followed all the rules of, as long as we followed all the rules that to have a um, legit event, and a safe event. So it was a very, yeah, I remember a feeling of like just safety, like that it was a very relaxed event and very festive, very fun. Not as diverse as we would have liked. It was a very white crowd, primarily, probably vast majority. It was a not a very diverse campus at that time. But still, like a really cross section of people and a really good vibe. And yeah, talking to you about it was making me really, and looking through the pictures and stuff was making me uh, think of all the people and wanting to reach out to everyone.
Yeah. So I'm displaying some images, folks. Thank you again, Danielle, for providing them. I'm just going through, just kind of showing, some glances at the crowd. And then I've got a funny newspaper clipping you sent, just to your point of feeling invincible. That'll maybe be a good point to bounce back to, but let's just go through
Yeah,
some of these pictures. Do you want to share any thoughts? I want to be sure to give you the space. This is just a really good opportunity to capture history. So I don't
yeah.
mean to go too quickly through these if you have any
Oh,
thoughts to
thank
share.
you. Um, well, all of the people in these photos were participating in a public event, and I think they would be okay with their photos being shown publicly.
Yeah.
That's what was coming to mind to me, just how much has changed. This was the first digital camera I owned. It was a like early Kodak Easy Share.
Uh-huh.
So I was thinking about, wow, the camera that I took these with and the process of like,
Look at this
uh,
guy's cell phone. Sorry to cut you off,
oh,
but yeah,
please
just
do. No.
the time,
Oh,
you
I
know.
love it. Oh,
That's a Nokia.
I want to say he was the president of the Campus Greens or maybe the Campus Libertarians. We had like a coalition of groups that participated when we were students there. Oh, we were grilling.
I was about
Okay.
to say, I saw a grill back there. You guys had
Nice. I
some
don't even
food?
remember that, but I'm sure I ate whatever was grilled there.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Oh yeah, I think, it was probably, oh yeah, we had like some art, and um it was always fun to watch the people who were sitting up there having their lunch. That was the student union,
Oh,
and the people,
okay. So these people were like having lunch.
it's funny, some of their reactions in the background, and then lots of different kinds of speakers over the years. That's Shalene Title holding a
Oh yeah.
wooden leaf.
Wooden pot leaf. Yep. That's awesome. A little cannabis leaf. Oh, there you are. I take it with your necklace, your weed necklace.
Yep.
That's awesome. Super
Mm.
cool.
So
Everybody looks happy. What
yeah, yeah.
were you gonna say?
Well, I guess we just skipped class a lot to be able to do these kinds of things on campus during the school day, because this would be like all day on a Wednesday.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
There you are
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah. We would get student funds too. Like we were able to fund this through the student organization fund.
Very cool. Very cool. And were there like other it looked like I saw like SSDP normal, for example. So were there other advocacy groups that helped to join and kind of organize for this?
Yeah, we worked with campus, ACLU. Yep, we had the joint costume, and we had
That's
a
cool.
website. I mean, that was like early days of websites, and we had pretty good. I'm impressed with our graphics.
Yeah. You got a website, you got the graphics. That's pretty
We got a
cool.
we had a consistent logo that was pretty cool. We gotta figure out who this is. Her name's Karen. Karen, if you see this, I love you. And she was one of my early mentors.
Oh,
There was a
really?
really Illinois Normal board at that time, and I learned a lot about the festival situation from Karen, like that, what was going on in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio.
Hmm. This is something that stood out to me,
Sure, yeah.
yeah, his shirt, and we'll touch on this in another episode maybe, back in the 80s and such when urine testing really started to become a thing, but I thought that was really interesting to see this.
Our shirt, yeah, we had I was thinking about that too. Of course I don't still have that shirt, but just all the different issues that were new to us at the time, that
Hmm.
the drug war was ramping up. And yeah, most of these speakers were serious, but then as you saw, I mean, we had a joint playing a guitar. So I know we like tried to mix it up, but we were really serious activists on campus, I would say.
Nice. Yeah, and just for a reminder for folks, people were basically saying that, hey, the solution to the war on drugs is we'll just urine test everybody, students included. Um, and it is interesting to read, like the U of I, for example, had at least for student athletes,
Mhm.
drug testing. And I've got an old article about an athlete who was prevented from competing in certain events because certain schools had spelled out that people that test positive for marijuana can't participate, but in other events it just said performance enhancing drugs, and so they made the argument that cannabis was not a performance enhancing drug, and so
Mm,
he was able to participate in some events. We'll share that in a different episode.
yeah.
Anyways, just wanted to give some background on why urine testing may have been a shirt and a conversation point, because people forget.
Oh, well, to put this in perspective, at the time that we were organizing the events that are in these photos, the person behind a lot of that urine testing was Peter Benzinger. And it was like one of the first times where it was being exposed that these like federal drug warriors were actually turning around and making a ton of money off of urine testing.
Mm,
uh, John Ashcroft was in office at the time I got involved on campus. When we started the chapter of SSDP and Normal, I was just so in shocked about some of the stuff that Ashcroft was doing.
hmm, damn.
So yeah, for another episode, the
Yeah.
going down the lane was like bringing up a lot of how a lot has happened in Illinois that's kind of lost to history, except for these
Right.
little newspaper clips. Oh my gosh, there was no media coverage at the time. So this event, I felt as much as I could be aware as like early, I was like 19 or 20 years old and from the Chicago suburbs. What did I really know about what was going on in the world, especially about cannabis policy? But I did I did see that when there was media coverage at that time, it was negative. And I took it upon myself to be a spokesperson of privilege, like, hey, I'm a college student who has this platform, and just to speak about whatever it was at the time. So we
Yeah.
did
And
media coverage of Hash Wednesday, maybe playing into the stereotypes a little bit, but overall, it was some of the only positive media coverage at that time related to cannabis.
yeah, here's an example of that. Here you are saying drugs are not evil. I'm not evil. Yes, I smoke weed, but who cares? I want to get that framed.
I didn't notice that, but I did. Thank you for saying that because my eye went straight to the other quote, the bolded one.
This
Um,
one, yeah, I was gonna actually, this is how I was gonna wrap it back to you saying you felt invincible. It's very interesting to see this quote from what was it? I guess the University Police Department.
yeah.
Um, he says you're basically disrespecting the rules and the regulations of the university. If it's against the law, it's against the law. Until it's legal, it's illegal.
That was the kind of quotes that were used at that time. Yes.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Interesting stuff.
I know that, and Shalene might remember more specifically about the political context of this moment for us was we were on very good terms with a lot of different levels of power holders, whether it was campus, community. We knew our local elected officials. We were always doing things in coalition with community groups and broader than cannabis groups. So yeah, to looking back now, I feel good about the media work that we did. Sometimes I do wonder, did I even accomplish anything? I've just been so lucky to have the path that I've had. A lot of it has been a like professional career path that all kind of came out of the organizing in Urbana-Champaign through the existing structures of that time for the drug policy movement.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I say, well done. And I wanted to show a few more pictures of newspaper clippings that you sent, and then I'll maybe throw some more questions your way. But I think it is funny to think about, yeah, that youth, that feeling that you get in your youth where, yeah, you're like invincible, but you actually did have it sounds like a really solid approach by looping in the stakeholders that you might be worried about, like your local representatives, and letting the university know when and where you're hosting this event, not just showing up and risking getting in trouble that way. It sounds like you really did try to approach it as in the rules as you could, if
Mhm.
for lack of better words.
Yeah, definitely. And then knowing that we were taking a risk with people possessing and consuming on campus. So I know that there's many people who didn't feel comfortable participating in the smoke out on campus during the day, but we would have events in the evening and off campus where it was a safer space legally.
Yeah. Yeah,
Folks.
absolutely. Uh just to your point, I was going to show this newspaper clipping, and when we'll show others, you said, it's going to be interesting to see what people attending the event will do. She said, if people choose to smoke, that is their choice. The event is simply put on to inform and educate, you know? So,
Hmm.
yeah, I like that. I like that. This is another one that one of the
Mm.
pictures that we'll show later. I wasn't sure what was going on. I thought these kids were just openly rolling joints. It turns out you guys were rolling herbs like oregano and basil. And this quote is really hilarious. This person says, "I prefer basil," but all they had was oregano.
Yep,
He
that's
rolled
me on.
he rolled 23 cigarettes in 5 minutes. That's professional. I need to
That
hit
was,
up.
yeah, there were people that just came out of the woodwork and were rolling all kinds of intricate things. Everybody interpreted the assignment a little differently and knew that they could possibly end up in the newspaper like this.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Another newspaper clipping, looks like from 2005, just some coverage of Hash Wednesday. I thought was interesting to see. Um, Again, thank you so much for capturing this for history, because like you say, stuff like this could, and it could die, with whatever scan you took. So by doing this, we're preserving this in another format, so that people can see this. So it's really cool that you held
Nice.
on to these things. Hey, this
And they,
person's name's Cole. I'm already a fan.
oh, here we go. Yeah. I mean, I don't I don't know if these things are still online. I didn't look. I just figured it. I know that I had looked for some and they weren't still there. So I'm not surprised. Local newspapers or student newspapers.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it can be like you say. You can find some of this stuff, I'm sure, but yeah, a lot of this stuff can be tough to find. So it's super cool that we're doing this. Um, yeah, that was another newspaper. It looks like there's some more uh pictures here. I was gonna share some of the flyers that you uh
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
produced.
We had some pretty good graphic design for 2004.
That's what I'm saying.
I think there used to be like an actual stencil process as part of some of this, but
Be,
yeah,
it'd
it
be
was a whole
interesting to see if UIUC normal is still on, like, archived somewhere on the web, to see what the old website looks like.
right. Yeah, there's a lot of we could do a lot of digging from now that we're talking about this. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And then, oh, there, Karen Thomas. That was her name. Ideal Reform.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
okay.
Okay,
There you
that's
go.
all. My brain's like, because yeah, we used to do a lot of teach-ins. That was the thing to do, teach-ins back in the day.
That's very cool.
Um,
Looks like this is a press release, maybe.
yeah, we definitely did some press releases and faxed them around town.
Faxed them. That's something you don't hear anymore. Did you go to Kinko's and fax them somewhere or something like that? Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. We had like our hub wherever our like activist organizing hub was would have a fax machine and copy machine for sure.
that's funny. Uh, this is cool. Some old activities with Leap. We've had people, I believe, from Leap on the show in the past, so it's cool to see that they've been in the game that long, or in advocacy that long.
Yeah, yeah, that was the early days of Leap for sure. I've met a lot of people through Leap over the years. We've been working with them a long time. That was one of the organizations Shalene worked with uh after we graduated.
Yeah. Speaking of Shalene, Shalene is Queen Elizabeth, I
Oh
think.
man, yeah,
Yep.
this so
I'm
we
sure
had
she's
a
real happy that we're sharing this right now.
no, I actually did talk to her about this because yeah, you never know, like old photos oh, you're getting, you people see your show. So
Yeah.
um yeah, my memory was that Shalene won first prize in the costume contest. It was a celebrity stoner costume contest one year.
Okay.
We got runner up. She got second place. First place was the dude, and I still can't tell you what movie that's from, but it's not like my thing. So I was like, who's the
Yeah.
dude? Obviously, Shalene should win.
Yeah,
She was
it's
Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth. That is funny. Yeah, it's stumping me right now. I can't remember what movie that is either. But here's Shalene again
Oh,
as Queen Elizabeth, just in case that I showed it too short. But Do you remember who this individual is?
Oh, for sure. I was going to say, I definitely want to mention Brian Brickner. He was a longtime Illinois Normal Board member, possibly in the 90s, starting in
Okay.
the 90s, I mean. Yeah, Diana and Brian Brickner were we used to do a lot of activities up in Wicker Park and around Chicago and the capital, Springfield. I mean, the Illinois Normal Board was instrumental in a lot of lobbying activities at that time that we were tied into.
Awesome. Just a few other photos that were in this particular album. This looks like it's from 2005.
Oh,
Um,
the paper mache joint.
yeah, look at that massive joint.
Oh, there was like an offshoot club of our group called Legalize It, and then I believe Legalize It did a lot of this that you're seeing.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's the last one out of that album.
Right.
Actually, I didn't show this one. I thought this was cool. Free brownies for all. I'm guessing they were just regular brownies.
Yeah, so I would love to. I think we could find out. This might have been one of our first events where it was kind of a joke, or not. Yeah, it was like a gimmick.
Hmm.
It was just regular brownies, but we decided that was just one of our ongoing gimmicks, you know.
Yeah. It's to tell you something funny that will be featured in a later episode. One of the stories that somebody told me was that they would make regular brownies and roll joints of tobacco and pass it out amongst the crowd in order to dilute the supply. In other words, when people were, I guess, if officials were going around, it was hard to tell which brownies were normal, which were pot infused, which joints were tobacco, and which were cannabis, rolled. And so just kind of funny older history
Yeah.
in how they would do stuff like that. So I wanted to show just a few more photos in case you had any thoughts to share. And then I've got, some more of those questions that I'd sent you. Here is another look of the rolling competition. I thought, so I had seen this without context, and I thought these kids were just like doing it loud and proud, rolling up right in front of the student union, because you can kind of see in these photos it, green leafy substance. And I just thought, like, wow, this is they were really doing it. But they apparently, it was a rolling competition.
And that was kind of the point, right? Because we knew it was going to be a photo op, and it was also like a public demonstration. So it's like a
Yeah.
lot of people would stop, and you could see various levels of shock or amusement on their face.
Hmm.
The banner behind them says, "Your government is lying."
Oh, nice. I love it. I love it. Yeah, you can really see the herbs and spices in this photo. All their rolling trays. He's using his bongo as a rolling tray. I love that.
And that it reminded me how intense it would be to go into head shops at that time, how you had to really know the right language and like,
Right. Watch what you're saying.
yeah, I got kicked out of a few head shops just by like honestly shopping, looking for something, and in describing it to the person in the store of like what I was looking for. They're like, "Oh, you can't say that in my store, get out."
Yeah.
We don't do that here or whatever. So yeah, it
just to
was.
make just to make it a little bit more clear for folks that are listening, like, for example, Danielle, if you walked in and said, "Oh, I want that bong," they would go, "Hey, it's a water pipe." Is that what you're talking about?
You probably wouldn't get kicked out for that, but I
Sure.
think once I said I was describing the type of pipe, and I called it a hash pipe.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
so that got me
They were like,
kicked out.
"Hash is illegal, you little girl."
Right. And then on campus, when we were putting our first few events together, we were going around to the head shops in town, very naively. I was going into stores and asking for the owner and telling them what I'm doing. And, mostly they were supportive, but one of them was super annoyed. And I totally get it. Looking back, I'm like, wow, I was so, just the caucasity of some of the stuff I at that time.
I've never heard that saying. That's funny. I'm guessing that means you're really just leaning into your privilege of being white. Is that, am I
Oh
wrong?
yeah, I mean, I had some of it I knew that was going on, and some of it I still just it was just how I was, and I was really really angry. I had even at that age, I had already lived through a lot of things firsthand, like seen a lot of things firsthand, family and friends, and the difference between legal drugs and illegal drugs, and what the fuck is going on here. So we were all really angry.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but this event was it was our most, I would say, our most fun event other than the benefit concerts. It was like a day of celebration in a way, although now I think, gosh, we really still don't even have that much to celebrate as far as gains, and but culture has shifted quite a bit. Although, okay, here, one for many years, I don't know how many years, but one of the components of Ash Wednesday was the this display of photos of people who were incarcerated
Hmm.
for drug possession and sales. Um, so that was like a touring show at that time that would be at some form of that would be at all the festivals, cannabis festivals. So, oh, Fire Dance, that's Matt Atwood, one of the early founding members of SSDP. Nice.
Very interesting. And this is what is this? It's funny. I'm from Champaign, but I didn't go to school at the University of Illinois. So is this the quad or what is this?
That's the main quad.
Okay.
Um, and then so if you're from Champaign, but had you heard of Hash Wednesday?
Uh, Not until it was legalized and I met the individual I was referencing earlier, who's kind of more, I was actually looking for this. Here's more of those displays you were referencing earlier. But
Yeah.
I had first heard of Hash Wednesday from that old timer that I was referencing earlier that had participated all the way back in the 80s, but then said they also knew you from when you organized it, which I thought was kind of funny. So that's how I learned about Hash Wednesday. Um,
That's beautiful.
and it's just really quick. I was scanning the newspapers, some of the newspapers that I showed earlier, and somebody at the library approached me and they were just like, "Hey, everything going okay?" And I was just like, "Yeah." And they're just like, "Sorry to ask, but like, I just noticed you're scanning a lot over here. What are you scanning?" And I'm like, "Oh, just stuff for like Hash Wednesday history and stuff like that." And they're like, "Hash Wednesday," and they knew the individual that knows you, and they had participated in some Hash Wednesdays. And so this was in Champaign, just to show you kind of a house small world story. But sorry, I feel like you were about to maybe say something about what I'm displaying right now.
Well, this was really important, and I wish that I was prepared to speak more specifically about this. This was one version of this. There was a name for it was a touring demonstration, and there was a few books affiliated with this. I believe these images came from Mickey Norris and Chris Conrad's book.
Mm,
Um, so that made me think of how important Chris Conrad and Mickey Norris's work has been, and some of their books that at that time we didn't it what you couldn't just get online and find images and print stuff out. I mean, you could, for sure you could, but there wasn't a lot available, and I'm pretty sure at this time I was still on a dial up sometimes.
yeah,
I
yeah.
we have to fact check that, but it's like for some reason these images are reminding me of dial up when you're trying to put something like this together. And yeah, like you said earlier, Kinkos, and just this is pretty amazing that we had this displayed as part of the event for at least, I want to say, 2-3 years, and maybe it had been there historically. And that was really important. That was the book. I think, oh, Shattered Lives is what it's called. Shattered Lives was a photo, mostly photos, and it was some of the first images of people who were incarcerated for low-level drug crimes.
Mm,
And it was really humanizing what was going on at that time.
yeah. Yeah, and just for folks that like don't really realize what goes into this, I feel like, especially even myself, I don't have like can appreciate this, and I'm about to do my best to explain it. But I don't, since I didn't live during this time, I don't really have a full appreciation for the effort that was put into this. But just for example, you can see these like documents have been laminated so that they can withstand the wind. You know what I mean? Like, so they didn't just print it off, but you had to laminate it yourself. And it wasn't as easy as just buying like a $50 printer off of Amazon. Like, right? Like, I don't know. Printing was like,
It's,
you said you knew somebody with a printer earlier, but
yeah, right. Yeah, I just remember it being a lot that went into
right.
this. And it's still, it's still a lot of work. But yeah, this
Sure.
was like a living display that I remember feeling in awe of the people that were doing this around the country and had been doing it. This early 2000s, they'd been doing it, I want to say, for like maybe almost 10 years at that point. Just getting the information out, because this kind of information wasn't easily available online. There wasn't People didn't know that this kind of thing was happening. People had no idea that these kinds of situations were happening.
Right. I love these photos they chose too. Even though I can't read it, you can see these people had a family.
It's all about, yep, showing the families and the different kinds of people who end up serving like life sentences for drug conspiracy, for the mandatory minimums,
Right. Right.
Oh, it's
That's,
just so much worse and just so much more out of control. But
yeah.
that's for another show for sure.
Yeah. Looks like media coverage. Media was present.
Yeah, and campus is so pretty.
Yeah. There's you and Shalene with
That was
your fake joint, I presume. It'd be
yeah,
cool if it was a real
that
joint.
was
You and somebody else. Oh, who was that again?
Oh, that's Frank. Frank Narduli, and there's a whole group of folks, our friends to this day, who were super involved and made it happen.
Yeah. I think there's a silly photo of you two coming up. There we go.
Oh geez, oh my God, these are before selfies, you guys. I should have deleted those out of the folder I shared with you.
I figured maybe you did some curation. Um,
Not at all. I dumped it all in there for
oh,
you.
nice. Nice. There you go. This is funny. He's climbing the tree with the sign.
Yeah. But
People,
yeah, then the event would always kind of like wind down into just hanging out on the quad. This is some of our good friends.
that's super cool.
Rob.
Cool picture of him in the tree. Oh, is that the last one? I think that might have been the last one in the album. I'll be producing all these folks, so that you can browse through them at your own leisure. But wanted to share some of these on the line with Danielle, so to say, to share some memories. Um, just to get a little bit back on track. And I wanted to give you the space too, if we didn't show any particular images that you do have memories about, because I did skip some, I believe. But just generally, and you kind of touched on this. What was the atmosphere and like vibe of Hash Wednesday like while you were there? I mean, you kind of mentioned liberating all that stuff, but do you have anything else to add with regard to the atmosphere or vibe?
I do remember that a lot of people, even the people pictured who were volunteers helping run the event, were very fearful. Um, a lot of people had either had some involvement in criminal justice case of some, like a court case of some kind. They have some kind of record. So there was always that element that we were doing this as part of a much bigger picture that we had to be really quiet about. At that time, we still had to be really quiet about. I mean, still people, it's still stigmatized, right? But
Yeah.
there was I remember managing a lot of stigma and, for participants who were having to be very discreet, people who wanted to be supportive but felt that they couldn't, just a lot of factors. And the overall vibe, I mean, typically was lighthearted and felt safe. It never felt like, I imagine that today, if there was this kind of thing happening, or I mean, not to say today, but like at that time, we didn't have to worry about so much about police having being so quick to pull weapons or use
Mm,
force, especially in Urbana-Champaign. It was there's a lot of times where we had to talk to the police. I had to go and talk to the police as the representative of the group, but it was never hostile. Not that I know of, but I think I've always had like a bit of a sense of humor about it, like a dry sense of humor, or and mixed with like enough confidence, that I remember having to talk to the police, but I don't remember being like really scared, just like, okay, this could go bad. So we did have to be extremely cautious, but that was normal at the time. Um, it wasn't the surveillance culture that we have now. There was none of that. So I think at the same time that it was very, very illegal and very, very unusual for people to be gathering and smoking in public like this, it didn't feel like so much of a surveillance culture. And we never actually had any legal problems that I'm aware of. um I'm really curious about, the earlier years, the earlier events, Hash Wednesday,
yeah.
if there was more police activity. It was definitely always there. I mean, the police were always around, and were always imposing different rules and things on us, but um we were some of the leadership of our student group was there for 3 or 4 years in a row. So it got easier as we went, because the event got bigger, but it got easier because we built a relationship on campus. And it actually, one thing that looking back on all this, it reminded me that, at that time we also had a research project going with the city of Urbana, the chief of police of the city of Urbana. So Hash Wednesday was in Champaign, because campus was mostly in Champaign. But Urbana was, the neighbor city that was more progressive. And we helped the same group that put on Hash Wednesday on campus helped decriminalize cannabis in Urbana.
Oh wow. I didn't even realize that that had happened in Urbana. I would have to dig into some history on that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I hadn't had a chance to look into it because I think it may have passed and then changed again. And then because I saw some more recent news like 2012, around that time, that there was
Mm,
something that happened in Urbana. But yeah, even that kind of history could be lost with because we didn't document how that happened. But I did find a few files of where we our campus group compiled data for the city of Urbana, and then that data is what the chief of police used to present to the city council why they needed to decriminalize.
very cool. Very cool. Um, to your point, there was some law enforcement interactions in the past. This is in 1989. Just wanted to show this image really quick. It was a bit of a crackdown, and according to some of the students that I spoke to, this was a pretty traumatic event. Of it, I meant to say honestly, but obviously as well. Uh, so very interesting stuff. Sounds like maybe that something like that didn't really happen that you were aware of during your time at Hash Wednesday. So
Not that I remember. I think I would remember if there
yeah,
anything,
right,
but I
right.
could be wrong. There could have been things that happened that didn't seem like a big deal at the time, like maybe somebody got a citation or something, but I don't remember any citations.
Yeah. Well, another point you made earlier is like it's a real different time that you were in. Like you having that camera was kind of a rare thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, people had those Nokias, but they weren't really something you're taking out and posting on Instagram like people do nowadays. You know?
Yeah, you had a little chip that stored the photos, and then you had to like, back them up to a
Yeah.
computer. I don't know how rare that was. Maybe I've always been interested in, even when it was like Polaroid, I was always taking pictures as a kid. So
Sure.
I think that those might be some of the only photos that are out there of those years of Hash Wednesday, because also people didn't feel comfortable taking photos. So I know
Right.
I was very strategic. That's why I know almost every person who you can, if you can see their face in those photos, other than the people in the background,
Sure.
who were basically choosing to be on stage
Right.
behind our event. Yeah, it was a small world, but yeah, less documentation, less archiving of what was really going on.
Yeah. And what kind of impact do you think Hash Wednesday had on the university and the community at large, if any?
I think taken collectively with all of the other activities, all the educational events and community events that happened throughout the year, I think it was definitely an important part of the local culture. Like there was a lot of just awareness in general of Hash Wednesday, even if it was just as a joke. Um, just that level of awareness that that kind of thing was happening, I think felt really important at the time. It felt really compelling. Like we were actually, it was part of what was making a difference, because I think culture change is more important than policy change, although you need both. Um, but whatever the local culture is what people's quality of life and everything is linked to. So yeah, it did feel important to get into the media too, like we talked about that. Um, I'll look though, I have some more newspaper articles, like clippings, but events like Cash Wednesday were some of the only positive media coverage, and that feels important. And it did, we were always drawing the links to, that we had the privilege as students on campus, like the freedom to do that kind of thing, and that it was a totally different story off campus. And Champaign is a decent sized city, and then even though Urbana was progressive, it was complicated because it's a big college town. Yeah, so it felt important, like to keep traditions going, that, and especially something that ties the community to the campus, like Cash Wednesday did.
Yeah. And so were there any other memorable or significant moments or incidents or anything that stand out from your experiences at Hash Wednesday that you were kind of like thinking like, wow, I want to share that on air? I'm sure some of those stories came up if there are any.
Um, yeah, the costume contest was pretty epic. Things like that, that we were able to do all of that. Looking back on it was um that's just what came up for me, that and how much has changed since then. But yeah, no, I guess not. I guess not for that one,
Cool.
that
Um,
question.
so this one is it's kind of obvious for people that know what you do and maybe are tuning in already knowing what you do. But if you could share any insights into how Hash Wednesday may have influenced your uh, personal life um, during your time and after your time at UIUC.
Yeah, I know you asked me to introduce myself, and I realize now I didn't really do that. Um, so we on campus, all of that work led to a full-time career in cannabis, in the industry in California for many years. So, and everything I've done since then, really. I do remember feeling like, wow, like because we're at this place at this time, I've founded some campus groups. I was leading those groups and had access to the campus funding, and this thing, Hash Wednesday, that had been going on. We were um, trusted to do that, or were able to do that, and it was part of a lot of other activities that led to me being recruited out to California to work for Berkeley Patients Group. Um, that was in 2005, when the cannabis market in California looked completely different than it does now. So I was working in dispensaries, cultivation centers. I helped start Oaksterdam University. I was the first chancellor at Oaksterdam.
Cool.
Quick funny story about that. It all happened really fast. I was working in the Oaksterdam garden in the nursery, learning. I was helping take care of the clones and mother plants. And what we were doing was legal in Oakland, but definitely not legal really. But in Oakland, I was immersed in Bay Area cannabis culture for almost 15 years.
Hmm.
And, that's been just a wonderful part of my life. And yeah, teaching classes at Oaksterdam in the early days, 2007, and worked for at a cannabis doctor's office for many years in Berkeley. So that was cutting edge. Dr. Frank Lucido and nurse practitioner Maria Mangini were one of the first primary care offices to recommend cannabis. And then they went, and that was in 1995. When I was working for them in the 2000s, they were the first, one of the very first, and still one of the only doctors that is giving specific recommendations for cannabis for kids. A lot of our patients had autism and or seizures, cancer. So I've worked on the medical side very closely, managing that practice in Berkeley. And then just a range of other I guess gigs that were, also some of this really has felt like activism at the same time. But I worked with Chris Conrad and Mickey Norris. I've worked on a lot of with lawyers, criminal defense lawyers in California. um and then now currently, I mean, for the past almost 10 years, have been more self-employed, working with Shalene Title a lot. We have been organizing together since campus. I guess I didn't specifically say that. She was my co-founder for our campus groups. And she's done a lot of different kinds of work in the cannabis policy world. And currently we're working together again through Parabola Center. Shalene founded Parabola Center for Law and Policy. It's a nonprofit think tank. We're very focused on anti-monopoly work and trying to prepare for federal legalization. And we talk all the time about, we never would have predicted that this is where we'd be at this point in our life, that federal legalization is right around the corner. And we didn't even think we'd see any legalization in our lifetime. So it's happening really fast. It all started on the Urbana-Champaign campus, and now it's over 20 years later. And I am really, it's just full circle to be able to work with Shalene and a really unique nonprofit mission. And I'm not so much of a business person, but I did have a cannabis staffing agency, one of the first cannabis staffing companies, THC Staffing Group, and we had a mentoring program. I mean, I think there's still a lot yet to come. Right now, Shalene and I are really focused on Parabola Center, but it's still like just part of this whole giant puzzle of unraveling the war on drugs, and it's lifetimes of work ahead of us. So I'm really glad to be working on the more serious and important side of the work right now.
Yeah. So cannabis is a, oh, sorry, what were you going to
Oh
say?
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so cannabis is a gateway drug.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Sorry, a stupid joke, but what I was trying, do you get what I was trying to say by that?
No, for sure, it's like the gateway to the rest of my life.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of interesting. It was like, so, um, I'm just curious to kind of close, I feel like we've touched all the bases that I wanted to touch on, but you've alluded to this throughout, and I know this is a big topic to close on. So feel free to like take your time on it. And I know that we could also just do a whole entire episode on just this topic, but I am curious because you've alluded to it a few times, and it's a question I plan to ask all of the Hash Wednesday participants, how do they feel about the current state of legalization? Obviously, there's plenty of room for improvement, right? But one of the questions I wanted to kind of focus on that I think is pretty uniform across states right now is the idea that it's not like it's interesting to me. Speaking to some of the old participants, there was this like it sounds like at least in the 80s or whatever, there was this fracture in the community where it was like decriminalize or legalize. And it's not exactly what I thought it was. And that decriminalize was actually like a shorter baby step proposal. But then legalize was thought of as like this, like it's like the end goal, you know? But now we have legalization in Illinois and Colorado and so many other states. But what I see, and I've talked to like different defense attorneys, is like it seems like the main enforcement mechanism for legal cannabis is law enforcement. And to just to give you an example, like if I
Mhm.
have more than 30 grams, but I don't have a medical card in Illinois, you can get charged with like a pretty serious crime depending on how much exactly you do possess. And those possession limits are even lower for non-residents. This seems to be pretty standard. Like when I go to Colorado, I learned that that's how they kind of enforce their system. They still have possession limits. That's kind of what I wanted to focus on for this. You know, of course, there's so many other topics we could go on, but I'm just thinking of like back in the day in Hash Wednesday was, you know, somebody smoking on a joint that's like, yeah, I want weed to be legal, but you should only be able to have an ounce. You know, I'm just curious as somebody who participated in that back in the day, something as simple as a concept of possession limits. What do you think about things like that in our current state of legalization? Because I could make this conversation so much bigger than, you know, there's so much to talk about, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back then it was still an abstract concept that we thought would take a long time. And I still feel that way because I
yeah,
think that what we were really, what really drives us is true legalization, which is abolition work also. There's a lot of overlap of abolition work and
yeah,
legalization work. And right now, what we have is not legalization, it's tax and regulation. And we have some decriminalization that actually is more like abolition, like doing away with having any reason to detain, arrest, prosecute people. What's been happening is, yeah, we're actually having more categories of crimes, like more ways of detaining somebody and more cases, potential for cases against people, um in a way, because yeah, now a lot of what kinds of activity had been going on and just being kind of kept quiet is now, like, you know, you're operating, you're doing business without a license. Basically, like, now that there's the business aspect of it, it's just a whole different game that I did not anticipate, because again, I'm not a business person. I was a teenager who just thought that people should be able to smoke weed and grow weed at home, like small home grow, these basics that we still don't have in many places. Illinois, I am always telling people we really don't have home grow in Illinois, because you can only legally grow 5 plants if you're registered as a patient, and that's a whole thing. Like, the medicalization that's happened is not necessarily the best form of legalization. It's medicalization. That's something that's part of legalization, but it's just, now that it's been happening, it's really complicated. It's way more complicated than a lot of us thought in the beginning, of course, because we were basically
sure,
kids. We just, you know, thought we were just fighting for like the basics, home grow, freedom, just freedom of thought, you know, and public consumption. I mean, we still don't have that in a lot of places. So something like Cash Wednesday is still remarkable when you get people together and publicly consume in a place that technically they could, like, get into legal trouble for doing that. Still, that's like a lot of our public spaces. So we're still fighting for a lot of the same things. And meanwhile, the war on drugs has just raged on. And So we're still even figuring out a lot of the criminal justice reforms that we need, all of the different ways we have to unravel the war on drugs. We're barely just getting started on that work because the war on drugs continues. It's not even stopped yet. But we're making some progress overall as a society, through culture change and awareness, I think.
Yeah.
It's
Like
hard
you
to
said,
even know.
yeah, like you say, it like continues the drug war and it almost just manifests itself in a different way. And I think something that you said that really made a light bulb go off for me that somebody has said that reminds me of something that somebody has said on this show in the past. It's something to the effect of, it might have even been Shalene now that I think about it. Cannabis and the cannabis policy is the biggest it's the biggest like distinction between federal and state policy since slavery. And so, like you say, I might have said that, but I might have butchered that quote. But like you say, though, it is a lot like abolition work and similar to the end of slavery and trying to address racism. That work still goes on to this day. Like we've not addressed that, you know what I mean? So to your point, cannabis is like that, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, to specify, like, I think modern day, the abolition work that I got involved in college was specifically prison abolition, but prison is where we still have legal slavery that's like fully
Right.
out in the open legal. We have other forms of slavery still in this country, but and around the world too. Like same with it's all tied in with drug trade and international drug markets. I mean, yeah, and also it's a whole nother conversation, but just as far as what I've been working on for the last year, and longer, now that so much is happening in the US, and Shalene is involved in some of that work, other countries are looking to the US to exactly with the same questions as you, Cole, like, wait, like what's really even going on here? Is this, what are we really talking about between decrim, tax
Yeah.
and regulate, full legalization, and now we're talking about other drugs, and it's related to everyone we trade, import, export with. So that's all happening too. Meanwhile, a lot of other countries are looking to the US to see what's working, what's not working, so that we can figure this out on a larger scale. That's when I think some of the real repair can start. Like we can, on a international scale, for people to be able to benefit from um, legalization, not business. Cannabis business doesn't benefit anybody in other countries that who we've harmed
Right.
because of the drug. That just continues to make like a small percentage of people richer here. That's not helpful. Actually, it could be helpful. And in some parts of the country and the cannabis market, when you look at the social equity programs and kind of on a smaller scale, although Massachusetts, I wouldn't even say small scale. I'd say, really on a state level, there are some real lessons being learned about how the cannabis market could do better to be more equitable, to actually serve more of a purpose than just big business. So yeah, I could rant on for days with you, I'm sure. And I
Yeah.
just, everything's related. So I know I like talk in circles.
Hey, it's totally okay. This doesn't have to be the last time we get on. I'm glad we've been able to get together to talk about Hash Wednesday. So, well, just a last question. Looking back, do you think there's any legacy or lasting impact that this tradition has had? Um,
Hmm. Seems like it, even just from your experience of when you've been researching it and kind of around town on the beat.
yeah,
And it's like memorable for people, and it's a conversation starter. There's so many aspects to it. Um, yeah, it's reminding me too. I don't want to forget to tell you there's a local character who was named Chef Ra, um, who was part of the Hash Wednesday history, and he had a local. There was a really great local radio station that I'm sure is still there, and Chef Ra had a show, and there was a lot of awareness about who he was and that what he represented. He was affiliated with High Times as well. He had a column in High Times. So I think that that is an important part of the history of how something like Hash Wednesday continued on and off and on for so many years. Yeah, people like him who, were part of the community, lived in Champaign-Urbana for many years.
Yeah. And so I'm sorry, I said that was my final question, but you just reminded me that I do have one more question. Uh, a lot of the people that I've talked to said there's a lot of synchronicity around Champaign. For example, Keith Stroop or Strope, Illinois, Normal came out of, was started in Champaign. I think the guy that started High Times was from Champaign. Of course, Hash Wednesday, Champaign. In 1942, you can look this up and you can find this on the internet, but THC was actually discovered in Champaign. Yeah, and they, I believe, synthesized CBN and
Yeah, at the
yeah,
U of I.
yep, at the U of I.
Yeah,
This seems like a reach, but hear me out.
for
Hugh
sure.
Hefner went to the U of I, and he was a pretty big proponent of cannabis legalization. So,
He was a major funder of for Keith Stroop founding Normal.
oh, interesting. Didn't even know that. Yeah. But yeah, just wanted to see if you could comment on do you feel the same synchronicity? Do you have any other name drops of big people? I've heard like Jack Herrera came through the University of Illinois Champaign, like for protests and stuff.
Yeah, well, it got me bonus points with Ed Rosenthal when I first met him, and I ended up bringing him to campus, and he was very willing to come to what he called. I believe he was one of the people that called it shampoo banana. Um, and people used to always kind of test me, like the elders would be like, "Oh, shampoo banana," and then you have to know, like, "Oh yeah, Champaign-Urbana. Some people call it shampoo banana."
Okay. I was like, what?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I guess there's that synchronicity of it's a hub. It's always been a hub, a cultural hub, and kind of a um bit of a, I don't even want to say safe space, but safer space than um most other parts of Illinois. Other than Chicago. I'm sure there's some other, like, and that's changed now, but I think that that's, why Champaign-Urbana it was specifically Urbana. Urbana um just was a very, like, hippie kind of town and smaller than Champaign, and so that's part of the history as well, just the difference between the two. um yeah.
Yeah. Well,
uh, yeah, and other people, I'll let you know too if I think of anybody else, and I'm curious what you find when you're speaking to people. Oh, as far as who came through town, yeah, after Ed Rosenthal, we had several other visitors, usually from California, would come through, different leaders, and through LEAP. But big names, I don't know. And I know there's still a lot of important research going on campus. That's been a
yeah.
continuous thing.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks for that reminder, because there's um, a lot of hemp research and
Yes.
sort of degree now, right, in the
Uh-huh.
farm. Mhm.
Yeah, we just Dr. DK Lee, who kind of started that all at the UI at the University of Illinois, the hemp program and some of that hemp research, came on our show, the Chillinois podcast back in the day, and actually just recently ran into him and was talking about how the program's going, and it sounds like it's going really well. They have an avenue for, like, kind of a fiber industrial route, but then they also have a route for like cannabinoid production, like people that want to get into the cannabis industry. And I thought that's so cool. You can go to the University of Illinois and learn how to grow weed, just to put it bluntly. Um,
Yeah.
so super cool stuff to hear that that's how it continues on. And yeah, I'll just close with saying that I don't believe in much of anything. And I know that sounds depressing, but what I mean by that is, like, I'm not like a religious person or anything. I don't like believe in, like, spiritual stuff or anything like that. But like, it's hard for me not to, like, want to make something out of this. Like the fact that I grew up so close to Champaign-Urbana and just happened to have hit the trajectory that I'm on with drug policy, and this just like coincidence in Champaign-Urbana, it's like a really notable place. Like I just wonder if there was like something in the air, like, or if I just was influenced by somebody in a weird way, you know? I don't
It's
know.
weird. I do feel like I've always been seeking like the really good weed that you could get in Champaign, well, Urbana specifically, I would
Yeah.
say, um, that was grown locally or somewhere
Uh-huh.
not far. And maybe it's nostalgia, but like the mushroom chocolate, psilocybin chocolate, just I think the possibly the like larger subculture of like the drug culture there, and just the meeting of the minds, and just personal note, Allerton Park, if you don't already know, which
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure it's just a beautiful part of the Midwest, I guess, and a good school and all that. But yeah, it's a crossroads too, right? It's like the center, it's right in the center of the state. So a lot of people do come through there, or would go stay there and big names would come through, big musicians are always coming through there, or used to anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a crazy place. Like I say, I feel fortunate to have grown up near here, and I'm just checking. Yeah, Allerton's in Monticello. That's what you're referring to. Um, yeah, I've got actually a short clip that I made that I actually shot at Allerton. Do you want to watch it to close the show? It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
A little bit of commentary on it's satirical, so be ready. It gets a little outrageous, but it's a little bit of commentary on the current state of cannabis in Illinois, but other states as well. So it's
Hey.
shot at Allerton. So I'm a cannabis industry billionaire. And you know what? Things are going pretty goddamn well for me. I've established a firm regulatory foothold within several nascent cannabis markets across these United States. I've worked to ensure that nobody even has a chance to compete with me. You might be asking yourself, how did I do this? The answer is simple.
Cash money, bitch.
No, seriously, me and my VC bros Chad, Brad, and Thad poured at least $600K into lobbying in one state alone. I say at least because, of course, we weren't forthright with all of our political giving.
Oh! This is a venture capitalist knee.
You see that fucking knee? Fucking do it the other way, too.
Transparency simply isn't the goal. The goal is complete domination.
Yeah, me and my buddies Kirk, Aiden, and McKinley are starting a rock band. We're calling it Regulatory Capture.
I'm quickly becoming the king of cannabis. The next industry that I plan to colonize is the psychedelic industry.
I'm relatively bullish about Q2, but Q3, let me tell you, it's looking beautiful.
Yeah, we should celebrate. You want some?
What is that?
Weed?
I don't smoke, but I'll try.
Tune in. That's just me being silly. And Allerton.
Oh my gosh.
You get
See?
you get the joke though. It's just being outrageous about cannabis industry billionaires and
Yeah,
how they're
it's
out of
funny,
touch.
but also like so triggering, and
Yeah. Well,
stay
anyways,
focused today. I've tried to stay focused on like the positive aspect and just owning like that I had a role in this and talk about it from the heart. But yeah, I didn't mention Carol Ammons and Aaron Ammons and the just specifically more about the community that we were working within. So I feel like I didn't give enough credit to all the like the
yeah.
larger picture in Champaign-Urbana for sure. Definitely just speaking from my perspective, which was a student who's not from there.
Yeah.
And there's always been a long tradition of radical politics there. Like so much more you and I can talk about at some point, or I'll send you what I think of, like, just, yeah, it's definitely been a hub of radical thought. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up Representative Ammons. As you know, I'm a huge fan, but again, we're doing the true definition of a Midwestern goodbye on this one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my
but
the blurred the background is not working and it's like golden hour. So that's a good reminder. We are approaching the end.
yeah. Well, Danielle, I want to thank you for your time today. And again, I think we should do this again, just about anything and everything. I was glad though to be able to sit down with you and have a focus on Hash Wednesday and to archive some of this history. Thank you for helping me capture it.
Yes, thank you. It's been so good to talk and I look forward to more.
Cool. Well, folks, we'll see you in the next one. Take care.